Betrayal is never sudden. It is a slow fracture, hidden beneath polite smiles and casual words. Most people discover it only when the knife is already in their back. But Machiavelli understood. Betrayal leaves fingerprints long before the act. Those who are destined to betray you reveal themselves through subtle fractures in loyalty, shifts in tone, and the quiet reordering of their priorities. The masses believe loyalty is guaranteed by shared history, favors given, or trust earned over years. This is the first illusion. In truth, every loyalty has a breaking point, and the shrewd learn to detect its early signs. In this video, you will see the warning signals not as paranoia, but as tactical intelligence. You will learn how the soon-to-be traitor tests your boundaries, how they disguise ambition as agreement, and how they prepare the stage for your fall. By the end, betrayal will no longer be a shock. It will be a scheduled event you saw coming and quietly dismantled before it began. Watch closely. Those who cannot detect betrayal are always destroyed by it. Warning sign. 1. Their praise shifts to strategic silence. In every hierarchy, praise functions as reinforcement, a subtle currency that maintains order. Its flow is rarely random. It is directed toward those whose value remains high in the giver's calculation. When that current slows, it is not the product of distraction, but of recalibration. A shift in praise is the first tremor before the collapse. It begins so quietly, you almost miss it. Unday. The words that once confirmed your presence are absent. No applause, no acknowledgement, not even the smallest nod to your success. You tell yourself they are busy, preoccupied, maybe even tired. That lie is how most people fail. They do not see that silence is not absence. It is reallocation. The currency of their attention is no longer spent on you. It is being saved for someone else. And while you stand in that gap, explaining it away, the transfer of power has already begun. Silence is not neutral. It is a signal. It is the moment they begin to rewrite your role in their private order. Machiavelli taught that men must either be cherished or destroyed. The middle ground is where betrayal grows. Praise is a kind of cherishing, and when it stops, destruction is the only path left. They are no longer feeding the image of you that demands loyalty. They are starving it. This starvation is strategic. It lowers your perceived worth in the eyes of others, and eventually, in your own. That is when you will make mistakes. That is when they will move. You think silence is safer than insult. It isn't. An insult can be countered, confronted, crushed. Silence offers nothing to attack. It forces you into the role of the anxious performer, looking for cues, adjusting your actions to win back a response that will never come. That is the trap. You begin playing their game without knowing the rules. Every action you take to reclaim their praise becomes a piece of evidence they can use against you. Proof that your position is slipping, that your confidence has fractures, that you are willing to work for what was once freely given. When praise turns to silence, the weak respond with more generosity, more openness, more vulnerability. They try to earn back what was withheld. You will not. You will notice, record, and detach. You will watch how they distribute their attention now, who they favor, who they begin to echo, whose victories they suddenly magnify. This is not paranoia. This is intelligence gathering. Every redirection of their praise is a breadcrumb leading to their future allegiance. Follow it. Let it tell you what they will not say. And when the picture is complete, you will decide their value with the same cold arithmetic they used on you. This is where the mistake is made by those who confront too soon. You will not demand answers. You will not feed their satisfaction by revealing your awareness. You will leave the silence intact, as if you have not noticed. And while they believe they are conditioning you to accept your fading relevance, you will be conditioning them to underestimate you, to expose more than they intend, to believe they have you contained. Machiavelli's method was simple. Never stop a traitor who believes their plan is invisible. Their confidence makes them sloppy. Their sloppiness becomes your weapon. Understand the true danger. Praise is not just about recognition. It shapes the narrative others hold about you. When someone stops reinforcing that narrative, they are loosening the threads that hold your position together. Soon, others will stop echoing your worth because they no longer hear it from those they trusted to measure it. This decay is invisible to the untrained, but you are not untrained. You see the chain reaction before it begins, and you know exactly when to cut it short. You can end their access before they have the chance to rally others, or you can let it run just long enough to expose every co-conspirator. Both paths end in the same place. Control. The silence will grow heavier, more deliberate, more permanent. It is not an oversight. It is a preparation. They are rehearsing a future where your achievements no longer require acknowledgement, where your victories belong to someone else's story. If you allow this rehearsal to go unchecked, it becomes the reality they impose on everyone around you. That is why you must recognize the silence, not as an insult, but as a declaration. One that says your time in their orbit is ending. And if their orbit no longer serves you, you will let it collapse, and you will already be elsewhere before it burns. Warning sign. 2. They redefine your agreements in their favor. A loyal ally upholds the spirit of an agreement. A future traitor begins to reinterpret it. Machiavelli warned that betrayal rarely arrives in the form of an open attack. Instead, it begins as a quiet corruption of shared understanding, a slow erosion masked as reason. This is the art of subtle legalism, the twisting of language, the selective reframing of commitments, and the calculated bending of terms until the agreement no longer serves both parties, only them. When an agreement is forged, it is not just the written terms that matter, it is the spirit behind them. The mutual respect, the recognition of shared interest, and the unwritten understanding that each party's gain is tied to the other's. But a future betrayer begins their work by targeting the spirit. They do not burn the contract. They rewrite its meaning while keeping the paper intact. This is how they evade suspicion while advancing their agenda. In the political courts of Renaissance Italy, this tactic was common among ambitious rivals. They would nod to the treaty, praise the alliance, and then quietly reinterpret clauses in ways that allowed them to take more and give less, all under the guise of clarification. By the time their opponent noticed, the foundation of the deal had shifted. The battlefield was no longer even, and yet the aggressor could claim innocence, saying, "We agreed to this, did we not?" You will see this same maneuver in business. When a partner subtly rephrases deliverables, reframes timelines, or redefines success in ways that cost you more resources while benefiting them disproportionately. They may insert a minor adjustment to the payment schedule, a necessary modification to the scope, or a reasonable change to the performance criteria. Each move is framed as harmless, even mutually beneficial, but every shift weakens your position while strengthening theirs in personal relationships. This tactic appears when someone begins to redefine mutual boundaries without your consent. They might decide that certain behaviors are now acceptable, that certain obligations you once shared are now yours alone, or that certain concessions you made temporarily are now permanent expectations. They will not present these as demands. They will present them as if this was always the understanding. This is the genius of the tactic. It is not framed as a fight. It is framed as a misunderstanding. They disarm you with the appearance of reasonableness, making you question whether you are overreacting. And if you argue, they will position themselves as the voice of logic and fairness, making you seem emotional or uncooperative. The deeper purpose behind this strategy is twofold. First, it conditions you into accepting reduced influence. Every time you accept a minor change, you reinforce their belief that you can be pushed further. Second, it establishes a precedent for taking more later, once you have allowed the rules to be rewritten in their favor. Even once, they will return to that same maneuver, confident that they can repeat it without consequence. They know that direct confrontation risks awakening your defenses. They understand that a sudden, obvious betrayal might provoke decisive action, and so they work in increments. The clever predator does not pounce too soon. It moves in slow circles, tightening the noose without ever alarming the prey. The masses, when faced with such a person, often respond poorly. They get caught in endless debates over each small shift, pouring energy into proving they are right. They react emotionally to every adjustment, but because each adjustment is small, they rarely have the moral or legal justification to take decisive action. The result is exhaustion. They become too drained to mount a real defense, and in their fatigue, they concede even more ground. The elite, however, do not waste themselves in petty skirmishes. They keep their reactions contained. They record each shift, not just in their mind, but in writing. They document the pattern as it emerges, building a case that cannot be denied. They watch as the betrayer builds their strategy, and they wait. Machiavelli's counsel in such matters was precise. Never act on suspicion alone, and never confront before the trap is ready. Let the offender think they are winning. Allow them to become dependent on the advantage they are stealing from you. When their plans, resources, and ambitions are built entirely on this manipulated agreement, you strike, not in anger, but in cold finality. In that moment, removing your support will not just inconvenience them, it will collapse the very foundation they have built. The redefinition of agreements is not negotiation. Negotiation is mutual adaptation to new realities. This is one-sided theft dressed as reason. It is rehearsal for a future in which you no longer exist as an equal. And if you do not recognize it for what it is, you will find yourself defending a contract that no longer protects you. Here is the truth you must hold. An agreement is only as strong as your willingness to enforce its original spirit. Once you allow another to redefine it in their favor without consequence, you have already surrendered the war. Not because you were outmaneuvered in the moment, but because you allowed the meaning of the battlefield itself to be changed. When you sense this happening, you must resist the urge to argue over every small change. Instead, step back and see the entire picture. Are these changes consistently moving power in their direction? Are they eroding your influence while strengthening theirs? If so, stop treating each incident as an isolated misunderstanding. Recognize it as a single thread in a larger web. The wise understand that control over agreements is control over reality itself. Once you let someone else define the terms, You are playing their game and losing by their rules. Guard the original meaning of your commitments fiercely. Hold others to the spirit as well as the letter. And if they persist in rewriting the rules, make sure that when you act, it is decisive enough that they can never rewrite anything again. You are not powerless in this dynamic unless you accept the redefinition. The moment you identify this pattern, you hold an advantage they do not expect. Awareness. Use it. Do not announce your resistance. Do not signal your suspicion. Let them believe their changes have gone unnoticed while you prepare the exact moment to reclaim not just the agreement, but the power it represents. And when that moment comes, do not hesitate. The one who redefines agreements to favor themselves has already declared, silently but unmistakably, that they no longer see you as an equal. Your response must be equally clear. You will not be diminished, and you will not be rewritten. If you have ever felt someone twisting your words, reshaping your promises, or recasting your agreements for their own gain, understand this. You are standing at the early stages of betrayal. What you do next will determine whether you remain the architect of your fate or the pawn in theirs. Watch closely, prepare patiently, and when you move, ensure it is with the precision and inevitability of a blade finding its mark. Warning sign. 3. They begin to align with your rivals. Machiavelli called this the final and most dangerous sign. The traitor's gaze turns toward those who benefit from your fall. It is not a sudden turn, but a quiet pivot, almost imperceptible to the inattentive. At first, the changes are subtle. A choice of words, a repeated quote from someone who opposes you, a quiet echo of criticism you thought belonged to your adversaries alone. They may not openly defect yet, but their allegiance begins to migrate emotionally, intellectually, and socially, like water seeking the path of least resistance. They mirror your rivals' values, adopt their logic, and gradually integrate the enemy's worldview into their own conversation. This alignment often begins under the pretense of curiosity, of understanding both sides, or of networking with individuals they claim are necessary contacts. In truth, it is an emotional migration. They are positioning themselves to transition seamlessly when the moment of betrayal arrives. In politics, this is the aide who begins attending the rival's private gatherings, taking notes with feigned innocence. In business, it is the colleague who advocates, quietly and consistently, for strategies that favor competitors, framing them as rational or innovative. In personal life, it is the friend who laughs too long at the opponent's insult, or nods knowingly when criticism against you is uttered. The key is subtlety. They do not announce opposition. They do not confront you openly. Instead, they layer themselves with plausible deniability. They construct a buffer of civility, maintaining enough outward loyalty to avoid immediate suspicion while mentally and strategically aligning with those who seek your downfall. By the time the public act occurs, the abrupt betrayal or outright defection, the work has already been done. Weeks, sometimes months, of silent repositioning have created the conditions for maximum impact. The betrayal itself is merely the revelation of what has been true all along. You will feel an unspoken shift in energy, though it will seem like coincidence at first. Conversations that once centered on your priorities are now subtly redirected. Ideas you proposed are reframed as if they originated elsewhere. Allies you once considered mutual are quietly persuaded to entertain new perspectives, new loyalties. You are observing a network being rethreaded around your absence, and yet few will notice because the transitions are crafted to appear as natural evolution rather than premeditated strategy. Machiavelli's insight into this behavior was precise. Do not attempt to block the alignment outright. Doing so alerts the traitor and forces them into defensive improvisation. The wiser path is manipulation by design. Feed the traitor selective information. Present them with half-truths, carefully chosen opportunities, and misleading intelligence. Allow them to carry these insights into the orbit of your rivals, and in doing so, turn their act of alignment into a weapon against themselves. Their confidence blinds them to the traps they willingly step into. The more they believe they are advancing their position, the faster they accelerate toward collapse. Notice how even the most cautious betrayer will eventually make errors. When they begin echoing the rival's priorities too often, when their language over-aligns with competing values, they reveal not only intention, but vulnerability. Patterns emerge in timing, in frequency, in the subjects they emphasize. These patterns are not to be confronted immediately, but recorded, cataloged, and used to predict the moment of rupture. The elite understand that alignment is not instantaneous. It is a process, and in processes, predictability is power. The alignment also affects perception. Those around you, colleagues, friends, subordinates, may begin to mirror the traitor's adjustments unconsciously. They respond to the signals being sent, adopting the new narratives being amplified. By the time the traitor acts openly, they have often gathered a small coalition that validates the betrayal. Observing these ripples early allows you to determine which currents to reinforce, which to ignore, and which to manipulate so that the eventual fracture serves your own advantage. Your internal response must be cold and detached. Any hint of anger or paranoia will feed the traitor's strategy. They are watching not just your words, but your reaction. The tightening of control, the visible anxiety, the instinct to preemptively counteract. Machiavelli warned that men must either be destroyed or won over, but to misinterpret subtle alignment as minor disloyalty is to invite the former. You are not defending against alignment. You are orchestrating its consequences. You let them believe that their repositioning is unobserved while you prepare the conditions for the eventual strike. Understand the final layer. Alignment is an act of preparation, not execution. The traitor uses your rivals as scaffolding to strengthen their own hand, to gather intelligence, to learn the strategies and weaknesses of those who would oppose them. Each smile, each nod, each echoed value is a calculated step toward detachment from you. You must treat this as an intelligence operation. Every observed echo of the enemy's philosophy, every subtle adoption of alternative priorities, every clandestine communication is data. The more detailed your understanding, the more precise your response will be. When the traitor finally acts, the public defection will seem sudden, shocking, and devastating to those unprepared. You, however, have been anticipating this movement for weeks. You have mapped it, measured it, and manipulated the variables around it. Their alignment, which they believe to be an advantage, has become a channel to their own undoing, feeding them false signals, planting minor traps, and allowing them to internalize misleading patterns ensures that when the betrayal is revealed, it collapses their influence and exposes their network. What they saw as a bridge to power becomes a snare of their own making. The psychological truth is unavoidable. Humans align themselves based on self-interest before loyalty. Once the shift begins, it is rarely reversed. The eye that watches quietly, that measures every small nod and every repeated phrase, is the one that remains in control. You do not need to confront. You do not need to argue. You need only observe, adjust, and anticipate. Every interaction, every alignment with rivals, every subtle echo of an opposing worldview is a signal, a thread leading to the final moment. Follow it, and you can turn betrayal into strategy. Even if this alignment cannot be prevented entirely, it can always be engineered to work against the traitor. You can direct their actions by carefully distributing misinformation, by controlling which allies they observe and which resources they can access, and by planting subtle contradictions that will only be revealed at the precise moment. The alignment with your enemies is not a random event. It is a predictable process. By understanding it, you convert a threat into a weapon. Remember that the most devastating betrayals occur not from open conflict, but from strategic positioning. The traitor's alignment is a rehearsal for the moment when loyalty is no longer convenient. Machiavelli's counsel remains clear. The moment you detect alignment, do not panic, do not overreact. Control the context, manipulate the environment, and let their own confidence accelerate the outcome you desire. By the time the betrayal is visible, it is already contained, calculated, and advantageous. Every alliance they form, every subtle mirror of your adversary's behavior, every whispered agreement is part of a script you can read. If you remain detached, you are not emotionally invested in maintaining their loyalty. You are invested in understanding the pattern of their self-interest and using it to your own advantage. Silence, observation, and selective intervention are your tools. They will believe they are advancing while you quietly set the conditions for their undoing. The public act of betrayal is merely the unveiling of what has been true for weeks or months. The alignment with your rivals is complete, and yet for you, it is not a surprise. It is data. It is preparation. It is an opportunity. By the time they act, their position is already compromised, their influence already weakened, and the network of support they relied on already monitored and understood. Their triumph becomes an illusion, and yours becomes inevitable. Closing principle. Betrayal is a calendar, not a surprise. The masses experience betrayal as a shock. The elite see it as a deadline they have been tracking for months. Machiavelli's insight was that betrayal follows a predictable sequence: emotional withdrawal, contractual distortion, and strategic realignment. Once you recognize this order, you remove the element of surprise, and with it, the traitor's advantage. By reframing betrayal as an inevitable stage in certain relationships, you position yourself to preemptively weaken, control, or redirect it. This is not paranoia. It is political hygiene. Just as a fortress anticipates siege, you must anticipate the moment when loyalty becomes untenable. The goal is not to preserve every relationship, but to ensure no relationship has the power to end you. This requires quiet observation, emotional distance, and a willingness to dismantle a threat before it believes it is ready to strike. Machiavelli's final instruction was clear: never waste outrage on betrayal. Outrage is noise, and noise is weakness. Betrayal is not the end of trust. It is the proof that your trust was correctly placed in someone ambitious enough to eventually turn. The only question is whether you allowed them to succeed. If you want more of Machiavelli's ruthless strategies before anyone turns on you, subscribe now and know their next move before they do.